The muscular monster in front of them wasn't actually a Martian but a roachman, mutated from a cockroach. In the blink of an eye, the cockroach man breaks the woman's neck while the man survives. Shokichi questioned the roachman why it harmed his girlfriend. However, the roachman paid no attention to Shokichi, considering humans as weak as ants, easily crushed at any moment. Then, in a flash, the roachman coolly left the scene. Shokichi brought his girlfriend's body back to the spaceship, only to learn that another female teammate named Asuka had also died at the hands of the roachman. This sent everyone into panic. Their mission was to exterminate cockroaches on Mars, but they hadn't anticipated encountering such horrific roach monsters. Faced with Shokichi's questions, Captain Dojima finally revealed the purpose of their Martian mission. 500 years ago, due to population increase and Earth's dwindling resources, humanity embarked on a grand plan to colonize Mars. To make Mars' harsh environment suitable for human habitation, they first altered the planet's surface temperature. Then, they sent moss and cockroaches, known for their tenacity, to Mars. Unexpectedly, centuries later, not only had the cockroaches survived on Mars, but they had also mutated under such extreme conditions. Previously, a Mars 1 spaceship was sent to explore, but it was completely destroyed. To ensure the success of the colonization plan and to completely eliminate the roachmen, they had no choice but to send the Mars 2 spaceship. Honda, responsible for this mission, spent a significant amount of money to recruit some prisoners, promising them freedom and a substantial sum of money upon completing the task. However, Honda merely mentioned exterminating cockroaches on Mars without disclosing how terrifying these cockroaches were, obviously deceiving everyone. At this moment, Honda's holographic projection suddenly appeared on the spaceship. An angry Shokichi swung a punch at it, demanding to know why Honda deceived everyone, but Honda told Shokichi not to panic, as they were not unprepared for this mission. Before departure, Honda had modified everyone, implanting insect DNA into each person's body. Injecting an insect cell activator into their bodies would grant them temporary superpowers, enough to combat the roachmen. Dojima then transmitted each person's abilities into their brains. However, as everyone's physique differed, the insect powers they received varied. Dojima specifically warned not to use too much of the activator unless absolutely necessary, as it could be life-threatening. Unexpectedly, just as Dojima finished speaking, a roachman appeared outside the spaceship. A battle-hardened former Special Forces soldier stepped forward to confront the roachman. Watching God Lee's composed demeanor, everyone thought he had the situation under control, but when he injected the cell activator into his body, he transformed into a midrid beetle with the ability to breathe fire. Despite this, God Lee's combat abilities far exceeded those of ordinary people, and he held his own against the formidable roachman. Furthermore, God Lee could emit scorching flames from his hands. Intending to end the fight with this move, God Lee thought he could incinerate the cockroach, but it had no effect. After all, surviving on harsh Mars for centuries requires a strong physique. Just as God Lee prepared for another attack, the roachman teleported forward and finished him off. Everyone was stunned, but the next second, the roachman appeared on the spaceship, relentlessly ramming its head against the glass, trying to break into the interior. Mina reassured everyone not to worry because the tempered glass of Mars 2 couldn't possibly be shattered. But before Mina could finish speaking, the roachman had already broken through the window, killing 2 team members as it fell inside. Seeing this, Dojima immediately injected the cell activator into his body, transforming into a bullet ant. Indeed, the bullet ant was formidable. Its fists, like bullets, quickly took down a roachman, but their relief lasted only 3 seconds before the spaceship's radar detected more roachmen rapidly approaching. Facing such numbers, they had no chance of victory, so Dojima reluctantly ordered to abort the mission and return to Earth immediately. Unexpectedly, at that moment, the spaceship's launch system malfunctioned. The only solution was to go to the nearby Mars 1 spaceship and transplant its system to Mars 2. The systems of the 2 spaceships were the same. If the transplant was successful, they could take off again. Dojima decided to stay and hold off the Roach army, sending Mina and others to Mars 1. Ichiro also chose to stay and fight alongside Dojima. Before leaving, Shokichi goes to his girlfriend Nanao's body to say goodbye, but sees a strange tentacle growing out of Nanao's head. Soon, the group boarded a space car. Tezuka's ability came in handy at this moment. After injecting the cell activator into his neck, a tube immediately extended out of his mouth. As the steel door opened, they were met with a sea of roachmen outside. Tezuka immediately prepared. his cheeks puffing out like a toad, and then a stream of flame burst forth. The immense thrust, like a rocket launch, ignored the swarming roachman and pushed the space car out in an instant. Tezuka was a rove beetle, whose tail gas could allow it to escape quickly in danger, reaching speeds of up to 1,000 kilometers per hour. With Tezuka's continuous effort, the space car sped towards its destination. The girls couldn't help but praise Tezuka for being so amazing. But soon, a new crisis appeared. A huge wall suddenly loomed ahead, looking like a tsunami rushing towards them, but something seemed off upon closer inspection. As the camera zoomed in, they realized it was a tsunami of roachmen composed of countless individuals. They had no choice but to charge through, success hinging on Tezuka. As the space car plunged into the roach tsunami, countless limbs and body parts battered the windshield. Although Tezuka above had suffered a lot, but with his persistence, the space car finally came out from the inside. Everyone sighed in relief. After a brief adjustment, Tezuka continued to push forward, but as Mina's gaze shifted forward, her smile vanished instantly. Seeing another massive wave of roachmen sweeping towards them, this time, Tezuka couldn't withstand it alone. To cover him, the two girls had to transform, being hard-shelled beetles with giant pincers excellent for defense. As the roach tsunami neared, Tezuka went all out with firepower, and the girls took a defensive stance. As the roach tsunami engulfed the space car, a massive impact followed. Despite the girls' cover, the scale was too vast. The moment the space car broke out, it suffered a power shortage and overturned, throwing them out. Those inside were knocked unconscious by the tremendous force. Fortunately, before the roachmen arrived, the space car entered autopilot mode and whisked them away from the danger. However, the remaining three were not so lucky. A dense swarm of roachmen had already approached. Having exhausted too much energy, the three could only resign themselves to their fate as lambs to the slaughter, with the two girls being killed first. Watching his teammates die, Tezuka mustered his last bit of strength to stand, but he too couldn't escape his grim fate. Meanwhile, on Mars 2, Dojima and Ichiro were also embroiled in a fierce battle. After luring most of the roachmen into the spaceship, Dojima ordered Ichiro to close the ship's protective shields. They then vented all the oxygen from the ship, attempting to kill the roachmen inside in a suicide attack. As the oxygen levels dropped, the roachmen became dazed as if intoxicated. With their combat abilities significantly diminished, Dojima could take down a roachman with a single punch, but after all the roachmen were eliminated, both men lost consciousness due to lack of oxygen. At this time, the space car side has arrived at the destination safely. The unconscious people also woke up, but when they tried to start Mars 1, they discovered its system was also faulty. Suddenly, gunfire was heard outside. Two teammates who hadn't had the chance to transform were killed by the roachmen. When they went outside, they found the two already dead. Never expecting the roachmen to use guns, Shokichi then had no choice but to transform, becoming an Asian giant hornet, whose venomous stings could down a strong roachman with a single hit. Seeing Shokichi's prowess, Muto couldn't resist injecting himself with the drug. He transformed into a desert locust with incredibly powerful legs that could leap over 10-story buildings, and his leg attacks were unparalleled. Conversely, Mina became an orchid mantis, her hands like sharp blades, making light work of the roachman as if slicing through vegetables. Together, they quickly dealt with a dozen roachmen. On Mars 2, the spaceship's oxygen supply was slowly being restored. A barely alive Dojima discovered another roachman with a gun pointed at him inside the ship, but to Dojima's surprise, the roachman's body burst open, revealing Asuka, who had supposedly died earlier. Asuka was an emerald cockroach wasp. Her sting could control the brains of roachmen, making them her puppets. She had used this ability to survive by controlling a roachman earlier. Asuka's mission to Mars wasn't just to exterminate roaches but to execute another task given by Kohanda secretly, to bring a roach egg back to Earth. Because Dojima disagreed with this plan, Asuka had no choice but to shoot him, and Ichiro lying nearby was also Asuka's accomplice. Asuka revived Ichiro by pouring water over him, who turned out to be a sleeping chironomid, possessing an almost invincible survival technique. Once in this state, it could survive boiling water for 2.5 minutes, temperatures below -200 degrees, or even in a vacuum, only needing a cup of water to revive fully. The spaceship's launch system hadn't malfunctioned, it was Ichiro's sabotage, all to bring the roach egg back to Earth. Now with the roach egg aboard, they just needed to restart the spaceship to return to Earth. As Shokichi and the others prepared to return to Mars 2, they heard the engine roar from afar, followed by a drone appearing before them. It was controlled by Kohanda, who had been secretly observing them all along. With his plan nearing success, Honda revealed everything. The initial Mars 1 mission had been a total loss, but the escape pod returned to Earth with a Roachman's head. This head was used to develop the drug that fused insect and human DNA. But because this technology was still immature, they embarked on the interstellar journey of Mars 2. On the surface, the mission was to exterminate cockroaches, but in reality, it was to test the crew's combat data and bring roach eggs back to Earth. Only with roach eggs could their research make a breakthrough, allowing them to create a more perfect insect-human hybrid. Eventually, they hoped to possess a super army capable of rivaling nuclear weapons. Knowing all this, Shokichi wished he could return to Earth immediately to kill Honda in revenge, but without transportation, they couldn't make it back to the spaceship before its departure. Meanwhile, Asuka and Ichiro, preparing for takeoff, suddenly noticed the roach egg stirring. The roach inside hatched prematurely, and it was twins, emerging in a strange posture. Although Asuka was surprised, she didn't panic because her ability was to control others' brains. As the two cockroaches got up, Asuka quickly injected herself with the drug and dashed towards them, injecting toxins into their brains. Thinking she had everything under control, Asuka was shocked when the cockroaches didn't obey her orders and instead killed her on the spot. Clearly, these two cockroaches were not ordinary. Their bodies had evolved once again. By this time, the spaceship had already taken off, but the two cockroaches emitted a strange cry as if calling for help from their comrades on the ground. Unexpectedly, the cockroaches on the ground evolved wings and turned into flying cockroaches, swarming towards the spaceship in the sky. Soon, the entire spaceship was overrun by flying cockroaches. Ultimately, the ship couldn't withstand the weight and was forcefully pulled down. Ichiro, about to inject himself with the drug to fight back, was kicked up by a cockroach and fell unconscious again. As the number of cockroachmen continued to increase, the spaceship crashed precisely where Shokichi and the others were located. Far beyond Honda's expectations, just as Shokichi and his team had narrowly escaped one disaster, they were surrounded by a large group of cockroachmen led by the two cockroaches. A great battle seemed inevitable. As the enemies approached, they quickly injected themselves with the drug. Ordinary cockroachmen were no match for them, but the two cockroaches were different. Their foreheads bore distinct marks, making them the leaders of the cockroach army. Shokichi attempted a sneak attack on the cockroach leaders but was stunned by a punch. These two cockroaches were much stronger and their movements closely resembled those of humans. One of the cockroach leaders attacked Muto, and Mina stepped in to help, only to be killed by the leader. Mina's death unleashed Muto's fury, and he recklessly injected himself with more of the drug. Not only did Muto's appearance change, but his strength also significantly increased, easily dispatching several cockroachmen. Unsatisfied, Muto injected himself with a third dose of the drug. Evolving wings, the cockroaches also took to the air, engaging Muto in fierce aerial combat. Muto grabbed a cockroach and turned into an invincible gyroscope and won the air battle in a flash. However, due to the side effects of the potion, Muto's body had an adverse reaction and was knocked out by a cockroachman. Ignoring Shokichi's pleas, Muto injected himself with a fourth and fifth dose of the drug and launched another attack on the cockroachmen, managing to take down one of the leaders. Seeing the chief's head fall off, the cockroach chief and the cockroaches wore a horrified expression, but Muto had exhausted his combat ability, and although the cockroaches sought revenge, Shokichi intervened. By then, Muto had turned into a desert locust and could no longer revert to human form. An enraged Shokichi charged at the cockroach leader, only to be easily repelled. His venomous stingers broken by the leader, Shokichi's punch landed on the cockroach leader's face without causing any harm. Instead, he was kicked away forcefully. Just as the cockroach leader was about to deliver his final blow, a glowing figure appeared in the sky. Shokichi turns around and realizes that it's Nanao, who had her neck broken at the beginning. Her ability was that of a butterfly, allowing her to undergo metamorphosis after death and be reborn. Nanao fluttered her wings, sprinkling scales in the air, confusing the cockroaches. Only Muto and Shokichi sensed something was wrong. Nanao was triggering a massive dust explosion, preparing to self-destruct. Shokichi refused to accept this, hoping to return to Earth with his girlfriend. Shokichi's love for his girlfriend makes him develop wings and fly towards Nanao. But just before Shokichi reached Nanao, a cockroach picked up a weapon and fired at them. As the flames were about to engulf Shokichi, Muto saved him with his last bit of strength. Shokichi could only watch as Nanao was consumed by the fire. After a violent explosion, both fell from a great height. When Shokichi woke up, he was human again, but Muto died shortly after from overdosing on the drug. Surprisingly, the cockroach leader and a few cockroachmen survived. However, the leader was at its limit, and Shokichi took it down with a punch without using his powers. Instead of killing the wounded leader, Shokichi chose to spare it. Back at the spaceship, Shokichi found Ichiro also survived, ironically saved by spilled water. By now, Ichiro had no intention of serving Kohanda any longer. Shokichi decided to temporarily spare Ichiro, as Kohanda was the real villain. Together, they boarded an escape pod headed for Earth. Ready to expose everything that happened, the ground cockroachmen wanted to pursue but were stopped by the cockroach leader. The evolved leader, perhaps never intending to clash with humans, only sought to protect its home and comrades.